Before I start, I just want to ask a quick show of hands. Other than this week, has anybody heard of the Prime Plotter software before? Didn't think so. So this will be fun. So first of all, I'm Ron. Thank you for the invite and the introduction. Just a short thing. Not going to get into details about my background, other than started out of college on the Apple computer. Finished my career about 3 years ago at Microsoft in the Internet of Things area. So I always thought that was sort of funny, bookending my career with these two. But what I'm going to do today is talk about the history of the software package and why it was created, and show you some demos and things like that. First, I wanted to say thank you to quite a few people here and these groups and organizations. About 2 months ago, I brought my old Apple II to see if I can revive it. And the monitor died, had to replace the monitor. The drives didn't work, and we were able to get one of them working. And then I ordered another one on eBay. The power supply sizzled as I was doing all of this as well, and had to replace that. But back up and running, which has been great, because one thing we've been able to do is capture and archive all these disks and these applications, and they'll be available for everybody as well. The last thing I did is I brought the manual. It's pretty extensive and it's not easy to use without it. So we have archived the text files as well, and hopefully everybody will be able to enjoy that. But again, thank you for everybody. Glad I found this group. So, like the presentation yesterday, I'm going to go back 20 years before this to actually explain a little bit about why was this even created. So my father was a transportation engineer, and I'm sure nobody here has heard of him, but in the world of transportation, international world of transportation, he was actually pretty known. And he created this thing called the unified mechanism of travel, this model. And I remember when I was a kid in the 60s, he was working on this, and he developed a couple of very interesting things. One was this is the thing he's most known for. Still, I'll see them once in a while quoted on Wall Street Journal in an article or something. But he discovered something called travel time budget, which was very interesting. He did research work all over the world, in Asia and in Europe and Africa, the United States, other countries. And what he discovered was that no matter where you live or what mode of transportation you use, walking, bicycle, train, car, whatever it is, human beings allocate about an hour for commuting time. And it's sort of a constant across the world. So this became very interesting because it's very important when you design cities and where people live versus where they work, that these things get taken into consideration. So that was one of the things he was known for. The second thing was this model that he developed, and I got a chance to work with him on it a little bit before he passed away. And the difference between other models and his model was that his took into consideration people's behavior and how many households. So this is a sample from his model that ran, and we uploaded these disks as well. We archived them, and you'll see it has how many households, what's their income level, what's the size of the road network, and things like that. And the model would run through iterations to convergence. And there was a daily model, there was an hourly model. So the hourly model would give you information about rush hour in the morning, rush hour at night, things like that. And the model would run and run through iterations. And the reason I'm showing this on the right side is that when he published articles about this, he would put in graphics. And he initially used to do this by hand, and later we started using computers to produce the graphics, which sort of, you see where this is going in terms of the need for some of this. So what was the approach? So when I was a kid, a few years old, I used to see him working on our kitchen table, and he used the tools that were available to him at the time, things like slide rule and very simple mathematical devices, which would allow him to do his math. And you can imagine running an iteration on that model would take weeks to months. He would just have to do each calculation. The equations were very sophisticated. So then he moved it into running it on a mainframe. He would get some time at a place that had the mainframe. take his punch cards, he'd put the thing in, let's say the daily model or the hourly, he'd run it. Weeks later, he'd get the results, he'd go back, run the next iteration, and just did that. Took a really long time to accomplish this. So then the 4-function calculator came out, cut his work in half. Then he got a Casio scientific calculator. We have all these pictures, what we have at home. And he used that, did all the equations, and that cut his work in half. Then he got an HP, one of the 60 series, and that was a scientific calculator. Then he went to the TI 58C, I think it was, which had the little modules and equations, and you can actually use those, and that improved his time. And then we started seeing some special computers. We got this wonderful TRS-80, and he was able to do a basic program, calculate the equations, and then again run through his models. He would sit there and hit, one line at a time to get it going, and he would run, and that cut his work in half. And then the Apple came out and put the whole model on the Apple, and it ran in less than 30 minutes. Today, I imagine if we run it on some sort of a system, it'll probably take seconds to run that type of model. But we have it, and it's fun to run. You run it, you say how many households, how many things, and it would go through. And the reason it's really interesting to take this behavior, so a funny little story, in the 70s, they did a experiment between Richmond, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. And they wanted to address congestion and the air quality and things like that. So the Department of Transportation did a study. They had people sit there and count the number of vehicles that go through the roadway, and then they assumed that if they would make buses free in this corridor between Richmond and Virginia, the number of cars would go down and the air pollution would go down. Seems reasonable. My father ran his model and showed exactly the opposite. And what happened was, they initially, when they started counting the cars, they saw a little drop. And 6 months later, number of cars shot up and the pollution shot up. So my father called this the meat and potato syndrome. So you can imagine if people don't have a lot of money, they eat potatoes 5 days a week, and they eat meat twice a week. And tomorrow, potatoes would be free. Question is, would you eat potatoes 7 days a week? Or would you take the money from the potatoes and eat meat 4 days a week because that's the preferred commodity? And that's what happens with people's behavior. So what happened was, some people who were already drivers to DC thought, don't want to deal with the congestion, I may as well take a free bus. So they rode the bus. But economically, the free buses provided a lot of access to DC for people less fortunate over in Richmond, and they were able to take the bus and get to DC and get jobs. So they started riding the free bus to their job, and they started making money. And after a few months, what did they do? They bought the preferred commodity, they bought cars, but they can only afford used old cars. So they all were polluting cars in the 70s, and the pollution shot up. So that was what his model was about, and very interesting stuff. He also wrote some papers in the 70s. I'm sure people around the DC area, if you live where I live, would be shocked at this, that in the 70s, he predicted that there weren't enough roads and there was not enough quarters into the city, and the city would just choke up after 20 years, 30 years, and here we are. So a lot of transportation work, and that was the precursor. So all these graphics were important. So he had an idea. He would publish these papers, and people started seeing the graphs that were in there. Started asking him, how did you do that? So he thought, maybe there's a market for this. So decided to do this. My brother-in-law was the first programmer on this, and the two of them worked on this together and created the graphics and statistics package. It had 16 statistical routines. It did XY plotting. It had pie charts, which I'll talk about. A lot of labeling capabilities. It allowed you to draw anything you wanted to. So there was a free draw that you can do things. A library of symbols. You could also create your own symbols and create your own libraries and things like that. Again, we'll show some demos of what was special about this. And that was the idea. So here's some sample outputs. These are actually from pen plotters that we support, and I'll talk about that. But you can see graphics in color. You can see that the Circles are perfect, and I'll get to how we accomplish that, because you're dealing with a pen plotter, not a dot matrix sort of a screen dump. We're able to do curve fits and 3Ds and exploding pie charts and character sets and all these wonderful things. We also, you can see a figure chart. So if you wanted to do something a little nicer, you're talking about the housing market, you can use a symbol of a house instead of the bar charts, and be able to do things like that. So give you a lot of capabilities. We got a lot of recognition. These are some of the magazines that we reviewed. We did some stuff with Washington Apple Pie, then the InfoWorld, Peelings, Micro. They reviewed all our software, and I'll share some of the quotes that they gave us. That's why I said it's sort of interesting that a lot of people haven't heard about it, even though we got some great ratings. So you can see over here on the bottom left, this was our half-page ad. This was our full-page ad in all those magazines, Byte magazines even. And you can see Peelings 2 gave us an A+ compared to VisiPlot and PFS Graphs and Apple Graphics and things like that. And some of the comments were that, this is the best package ever for graphics, the most comprehensive. If you need the flexibility, it does, this package does it all and does it well, and things like that. So we did very well with this. You can see some of the results of the free draw over on the left. A compound, and then you can see on the right side, I was an electrical engineer, so I had to put something in. So I created a library of the resistors and all those symbols, be able to position them and create some circuit diagrams and things like that. So quite rich in its features. You can copy and paste, and you can do a lot of things. So what are some of the innovations? Because this was really important, I think, in terms of when we did this. So you can imagine, obviously, everybody here knows the limitations. We started with a 48K Apple II Plus, then put a 16K card, so 64K of memory. How do you do all this stuff and all these graphics and everything with that? So the first thing that we did was use modules. So when you're doing XY graphics, the pie chart modules on the disk, if you want to switch them, you basically just load them. They load into memory when you need them. If you're doing a replay, which I'll talk about in a minute, it'll load them as needed based on what you did. So we got around some of the memory stuff by using modules for a lot of the different things and be able to provide more. The next thing is used replay. So again, you can take the screen. A lot of the other software packages took a screen dump and send it to a dot matrix printer, but we just couldn't deal with all the stuff that we did and the memory. How would we do that? So rather than saving the images, we saved the instructions to create the graphics. So it was small text files, and we just had all these instructions of, where the positioning on the screen, what to do, and all of that. And because of that, we could do what we called replay. So all these things were listed. You could save it to a file, and at any time you can recreate it for a slideshow, or send it, what we discovered later, just convert it to a pen plotter language, and the pen plotter would redraw this for us. And because it could do it perfectly, the equations were perfect, so you get a perfect circle rather than the jagged edge sort of on the screen. So pen plotter support was huge for us. I'll talk about that in a little bit as well. The next thing we did, which was funny, because Mark said that he's never seen copy protection, because obviously there's a lot of copy protection out there. Didn't quite see the copy protection that we had. So we actually hired somebody and commissioned a custom thing. Everybody was afraid about software being pirated. So they developed copy protection for us, which had a few interesting things, other than the things you're familiar with, the half sectors and things like that were written. We also put in things like each disk had a code. When it was read into memory, it would translate the code. So if you took an image of the memory and try to save it to disk and later use it from the disk, it would come up and tell you that's the wrong number. It knows what it should have been on the disk. What you got was the translated number rather than the original number before it was translated. So it would be able to detect that and not start the program. So that was pretty sophisticated. And then we had 3D pie charts, which I'll get to in a minute. We were the first package to offer that on a personal computer. And then the other thing, which was very interesting, but also caused us some issues with trying to figure out how to do things was that rather than the competition where you created a graph, it figured out for you the scale of the X and the Y, you hit it, it picked the bar charts for you and drew the picture. With us, you could change every custom default. You can customize it completely and change anything. So what do I mean by that? Imagine you have tick marks on your x-axis. You can decide not only how many tick marks to have in between the big tick marks, you can decide not to have tick marks at all. You could even decide that the small tick marks are larger than the big tick marks and change the scale, and you could change any default in this. So that was a big thing. Another innovation I just wanted to mention because it was interesting, not related to the prime plotter, but my father became ill with a heart attack and had the idea of why doesn't he use the Apple to record his blood pressure. So we actually developed a card connected to a cuff, and we'll be able to record the blood pressure and all that. Obviously, that's available everywhere these days. So why didn't our takes off? I think we were really just too early. Technically it worked, but when we went to talk to the lawyers about this, they looked at it and said, your liability in those days were just huge. The liability if you didn't record something correctly, or somebody gets hurt, or there's a bug in a number, we'd get sued about that, and death and all these things that they were worried about. So we basically put on the shelf and never released it. But that was the type of stuff that was being innovated in this little 3-person company. So the pen plotters. So we have support, and these discs were archived as well. Strobe 100, the Apple 410, something we call Sweet Pea, Houston Instruments. What's it doing? It just popped up a rest your eyes message. Well, you're not seeing it, so that's fine. Houston Instrument and Hewlett Packard. Now, what was special about these? Those days, those pen plotters didn't have a lot of software, if any, that could actually drive them. So they put these things out there, this hardware, but they weren't selling a lot. So some of them approached us, and we made deals with them so that, for example, Hewlett Packard, this is the sheet that came with the Hewlett Packard. You'd get this folder when you bought it, and they gave you software in their package. And one of the things you got in those days was the prime plotter. So when you open the pen plotter, this folder came out. There were about 5 or 6 different packages in there, and we were one of them. So we made these deals, and through that, we sold thousands of units. It was interesting, you mentioned yesterday, some games only sold 40, 50 copies, things like that. We were in the thousands that we were selling, mainly because of these deals with pen plotter companies that distributed the software. And I still have a couple of these. I have a Sweet Pea, I think a Strobe, and a HP 7470 2-pen plotter still at home. So these work. These are just examples of the statistical modules. Again, there were 2 of them, so they would load as needed. Curve fit, various data analysis. And some of our clients, as you can imagine, were the Department of Agriculture, Woods Hole Oceanic Institute, Lawrence Livermore Lab, places like that. So at the time, a lot of people that needed the mathematics and also had the money to have pen plotters and things like that. So this is some of the stuff that came and still comes with the package. So the 3D pie charts, this was interesting. So as I said, my brother-in-law did most of the programming on this. I graduated Maryland 82 in electrical engineering degree and joined the company out of college and helped finish. So one of the things they were struggling with, he was struggling with to program, because he was not a traditional programmer. His degree was radio, television, and film. So he was learning this as he was going along, and we needed to do the 3D. So what was interesting about the pie charts, if you look at this, is that if you do a 3D pie chart over something like this, relatively easy, depending on your step, let's say 10 pixels, you drop these 2 lines and follow the curve. You follow these lines. Obviously, this is hidden. So you draw a connection between this and that line and stop when you hit this angle. So pretty easy to find this stuff. However, what do you do with software that allows you to change any default, as I mentioned? So you can imagine that. Whoa. Sleep. So you can imagine, what if I change the number of division and pieces? I can make this 8 and this 1. I can make this 1 and this 8 pieces. I can rotate this in any angle. So the opening could be small, it could be wide, it could be in any quadrant, it could be any angle. I can change the pitch as well, so everything changes. So what happens if, and we did this, I create a 3D step that's bigger than the opening? Well, the first time my brother-in-law ran that, it was trying to connect this to this line and blew up because it couldn't find the right connection. So it took me 3 days, not calculus, it was all geometry, funny enough, but it took me 3 days to figure out the equation to find the connection to the 3D part, not to the pi part, and make it work in any quadrant and anything in any combination. So able to do that, that was fun. Sort of, I always claimed that was one of my claim to fame, but I no real proof. So my kids always went, yeah, sure. So before I came here, I thought, well, if I make a statement like that, I could get challenged, I'm sure. So I went and typed in a prompt and said, who's the first with 3D pie charts in the early 80s on any personal computer like the Apple or the IBM PC? And it came down, well, of course, it was the Prime Plotter by PrimeSoft. Not to, there are other PrimeSofts today, but Lotus 123, VisiCalc, all these didn't have it. So we were indeed the first ones to do that, which is sort of fun to realize. Now, it's also fun to see 40 years of change in technology, because to do that thing I just showed you, we have to go through about 6 menus, load the pie chart module, type in the data, decide how many pieces on the left versus the right, how much to push out, how to do all this. So I thought, well, if you can give me this answer, can you draw me a pie? And it did a 3D pie chart just by me giving it a prompt. I told him sort of verbally the data, how big the data. Then I wanted to push the pie out. And then I told it to make the 3D bigger than the opening. And it found the right connection, right? It drew it correctly. So all that's already built into today's AI and knowledge, and you can do this. So it makes our software sort of obsolete. But it is interesting to see 40 years of development and where we are today with those sorts of capabilities. Maybe they use my code. Probably not. So next, I want to talk a little bit about AppleFest. So a couple, again, interesting stories. So we were selling a software package, and we started going to the AppleFest shows. So we had Boston, and one of the big ones we hit was Long Island. It was Nassau County and their convention center. And my brother-in-law and I put the computer, and we had all sorts of stuff for our booth, and we put in the back of a car. It was probably, I'm forgetting which one we took. It was either an AMC Sportabout or a Ford Maverick or my Chevy Monza. It was one of those three, and we put it, and we drove up there. And Friday was a setup day, and the schedule said we could set up till 5 p.m. And we drive up there, and we're starting to hit the New York traffic. We're getting worried, and we get there just around 4:45. So we pull up to the dock, and we open the thing, and we're trying to take the stuff out of the car to go in and set up. And the guy comes up to us, goes, "What do you guys think you're doing?" And I said, "We're going to take our stuff in." He goes, "Nope, it's a union shop. You're not going to do anything like that. We have to do it." I said, "Oh, great. Go do it." Goes, "Well, we get a 15-minute break every hour, and it's 4:45. So even though it says we do it till 5, we're not doing anything between 4:45 and 5. You can't do it." So we're panicked. We don't know what to do. We've got to get the stuff in there. So we had this amazing idea of, would you accept a few dollar bills? And Behold, they did. And they let us take the stuff in ourselves, and we set up after hours and got everything set up. So we're at the show, and we're doing rather well. We're getting overwhelmed, and we can't keep up with the sales and talking to everybody. So called my father and said, would you mind sending my girlfriend at the time, my wife today, and would you mind having her come up and help us in the booth with the stuff? So he did, and she came on the train and joined us Saturday. And we're trying to think what you can do, and we were accepting checks and credit cards and things like that. Funny enough, she worked at the American Bankers Association at the time, and we always had the rule. We had some bad checks that people gave us over time, so please get a credit card and a driver's license with the check from somebody when they do that. So she came up. There's a picture of my brother-in-law there sitting in the booth. You can see some people in the background. That's her. Took a few pictures, and she comes to me, and this is a completely true story, that one of the ones I love. She comes to me as I'm talking to a customer, knocks on my shoulder. She goes, "You're not going to believe this." She goes, "Just got this check. And this guy looks like he's homeless that somehow got into the show. He looks unkempt. His jeans are torn. And I asked him for a credit card. He says he doesn't have one. Ha. And I asked him for his driver's license, and he says he doesn't drive." So she gives me the check. I look at the check, and I look at him and I go, "We could take his check. He's worth $100 million." So there was standing there in his torn jeans and his beard and, t-shirt. And I got a chance to go meet him and talk to him. And what was great about him, such a great person, is that he was going booth to booth, buying everybody's software packages to take home to play with it, because you couldn't believe what people did with his invention. He was just trying to play with it to learn what have people done. And yes, we did cash the check, but I did keep the picture. You can see it's May '83, and just a great person. Not for this presentation. My wife has another funny story. She was an Army brat, went to Aberdeen High School and sat next to Cal Ripken in English. That's a whole nother story. I can tell it maybe afterwards. So a few sort of lessons learned, if you will, that I wanted to share about this, because my kids today go, "Wow, if you were selling thousands of these, why isn't the company still around? Why didn't you make a lot of money?" And we actually did at the time, because the whole family lived off of it. But I would say, probably have heard this before, don't do family companies if you can avoid that. So I was 22. My father passed away from a second heart attack at a very young age. My brother-in-law divorced my sister, and that was the end of the company. Basically, we just couldn't do this. So my mother and I ran it and still sold for a few years, what we had. But if you look at the market, we learned a lot of interesting things about the market, right? We had to always have an ad in any magazine. Couldn't afford to do, whatever, 8, 10 magazines at the time every week or every month, but we would rotate through them and get coverage. And as long as you advertised, we had sales. But after this all blew up, we just couldn't keep up spending that much money on the advertising. So sales started slowing down and going down, and that was sort of the end of that. We learned that the pen plotter approach was great. That's what really put the company on the map, selling thousands of copies because the pen plotter vendors put it in their packages. That was a great thing. We found out that working with distributors was not so much. So again, funny story at the time. A distributor approached us and said, "We'd like to represent you." So we're thinking, great. And my brother-in-law was extremely happy, thought we were going to make millions off of the deal. So the distributor came to us with the deal. Now we were selling, again, thousands of copies. We were doing it direct. So they came up with the following equation. They said, we couldn't sell direct anymore. We couldn't go to any other distributor. They had to be it. They would not commit to a quantity that they would sell at a minimum, and they would not commit to a time frame, meaning, oh, let's try it for 6 months, and if it doesn't work, we'll say, no, you have to give us all of that. And oh, by the way, they were selling our biggest competitor's software package already. So how many here would sign that deal? Yeah. So we did not sign that deal. But that was sort of the market at the time. It was very interesting to see, and you had to watch out for all these things. But learned a lot and worked well. The other thing that I learned, especially everybody here will probably appreciate this kind of, because I see everything that you guys are doing here with the equipment. I learned early on that programming, something especially like this, was more art than science. So I mentioned my brother-in-law learned how to use the Apple by himself, started doing all sorts of things. And when I sat with him after I graduated, started doing some work, he was trying to figure out some things, and I'm seeing him going into areas of memory that he shouldn't be able to go into. It's like the manual says, this is read only. You can't do that. No, but I'm running out of space. I got to write. So why don't I just write to this register here or do something temporary, and then I'll pull it out, and I'll do all these things. And I went, no, this won't work. So he tried it, and it worked. And I realized then that I had a limitation from getting the classical college education of hardware and programming that made me think in a box. I just couldn't imagine these things working. Well, he didn't know any better, so he tried, and things, Apple II was still pretty much a raw machine, and he was able to break the laws and do things that weren't quite. So a lot of the stuff that you see and the capabilities and things, and coming up with this idea of having a long word with bits that would tell you the pattern of the image, and does it have tick marks or is it a pie chart? All these things that he came up with taught me early on, you got to open your mind. And later, when I became more of a programmer myself, I enjoyed it, especially graphics, because it was, it's a form of expression, I found, more than just keying. So that was that. And then finally, just to mention something interesting about the name. So what's in a name? So I can also pass this, the PriPlot, if anybody wants to look at this. So about 6 months after my mother and I shut down the company, we got a letter from Prime Inc. Saying, oh, by the way, you can't use the word prime in your prime plotter hardware and software, or PrimeSoft. So we responded with, well, the prime plotter is not a hardware plotter. It's not a pen plotter. It's a software package. And by the way, we applied, we have trademarks and copyrights for this. And they basically came back and said, cease and desist. Don't care if you got trademark or whatever. We did first, so you shouldn't have gotten it, but even though you did, we own it first. And any relationships to computers, hardware, or software, and too bad. So we reply with, okay, it's moot, doesn't really matter. We don't use the name anymore. As you saw, AI, and I did search on this, there's about 5, 6, 7 companies going by the name PrimeSoft today. So I can only imagine not for long, because again, trademarks can only be held if you actually enforce them. So I'm sure Prime will send, if they haven't already, they will send them letters and do that. And then the last thing, which I thought was interesting, this is from 2 days ago, still being sold on eBay, the full set of the Prime Plotter. Again, what's great, we just archived all the discs, all the pen plotter discs, everything. So the master, the replay, everything with the protection, it runs, everything is. So if anybody wants to get a copy or play with it, please do. I'm just so excited that it's not dead. I thought that all of this stuff was lost when I couldn't get the Apple running and all that. And 99% of all the discs we have still worked, and we were able to archive them and get them. So just glad if anybody can still make use of it. We also copied all the manual, all the text files. I brought also the word processor, I think we used. So I'm going to test it before Mark puts it out in the archive, just to make sure that we can indeed read the text files, so you can actually look at them if you're interested, because the program's complicated enough that without the manual, nobody can I had to go back. It's been 40 years. I had to go back and look at the manual to remember some things. I think that's the last slide. We're within time. We have some time for questions. So let me run a demo. Well, maybe we take a few questions. So I'll start with.
You're probably gonna have 8 fillings.
Yeah, so it'll just go. So this is a demo we did with that replay feature. So we just went and started creating things, and you'll see just examples of everything you can do. And you can see every graph is completely different. You want these little dots on your screen, you can do that. You can have the tick marks. I said you can decide how many, frame, no frame, pretty frame, big tick marks, small tick marks, bar charts, 3D, which direction you want the 3D, the fill. So what kind of fill? Each bar can have a different fill if you want to. You can do the step of the 3D on that, and so forth. So while it's running, any questions? Yeah.
You mentioned this. Did you ever think of porting it to other computers?
It was so, yeah. So the question is, did we ever think about porting this to other computers? So when I got my first PC compatible, I still have that, trying to get that going again. Wise 286, 6 megahertz with a 10 megahertz turbo button. 30 megabyte full height hard disk. So what I tried to do is, there were so many crazy things that were so tied to the Apple that we just couldn't get this to run as is on a. So obviously it can run on an emulator, but not on another platform. So what I started doing is just programming from scratch, trying to do the same capabilities using Windows and C language and things like that. Just ran out of time, didn't have enough time to do that. It was so many features, so many complex things in there that never got to it. But yeah, we were thinking about that. Yeah.
You said the distributor who contacted you was also selling your biggest competitor. Who was your biggest competitor?
So I'm trying to think. So the question was, who was the distributor selling our biggest competitor? Who was? So I believe they were selling both. It was VisiPlot and PFS Graph were the ones that the biggest ones at the time. But again, yeah, they were selling theirs. It was clear what they were trying to do.
Hey, that's, first of all, super interesting presentation. So
Thank
very
you.
much for that. Did you have different versions, or was there ever only one version released?
So the question is, did we have multiple versions or just one version release? We weren't that great about versioning at the time. We did release version 1 and then fixed some bugs and became version 1.1. So the one we have is 1.1. And then for each pen plotter, the replay disk had a slightly different version for the replay. So the prime plotter itself stayed at version 1.1. That was the main one. We fixed some bugs along the way without releasing a whole, because one of the issue we had at the time, all of these were disks. They were all with a copy protection. So fix a bug. You got 3,000 users out there. How do you get it to them? There was no way to do it. So basically, when somebody would find a bug, we fixed it, send them a fix, and then from then on had the fix. And we would let people know that, you know, there was a list of bugs fixed, but, you know, and then we had the manual this is the second edition. So we put a second edition, which addressed some of that, but there was just not a great way of doing that. It's funny, you know, recently, a few years ago, when I was at Microsoft, I worked with the military on a project, and it was something similar. The folks that are the military, whenever they need an update to their communication, there was a contract for one of the big aerospace companies, $100 million. And what they do is whenever there is a bug fix, they put physical bodies on planes, send them to all the bases with the CDs, and have them update the CDs locally. So $100 million to do that. So when I was at Microsoft, we actually came up with over-the-air fix, which that company, and I won't tell you, they contacted their senators because they realized we could, you know, basically the fix, you could accomplish the same thing for $1 million instead of 100 million. And they weren't very happy that their state lost $100 million of work. But those days we didn't have the unless you want to use a 300 baud modem, there was not a lot over the air that we could do.
There weren't too many people in those days that were very good about version control and
Yeah,
versioning at all, which is really interesting because when we archive software, we find all these kinds of weird different versions.
Yeah. So I went, to get the discs working here, anything that was official original disc that worked, it did. But if something was damaged, I was able to find the original master, and I had dates on them. I had to go by the date, find the latest date, and go close enough. You know, this must be it. But yeah, that was funny. Again, lessons learned. Yeah, I don't know why this is. There we go.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you can see some of the things. So some of the things we were able to do here, you'll see there were, if you watch, copy areas, so you can copy things, but also because we could draw, we could scale. So anything that you drew, you could just take the same thing and say, multiply it by 2, and it'll draw the same thing for you on a pen plot or wherever you wanted to on that. But any?
On your word processing, I do a lot of work in converting word processors, especially old word processors. So need any help with that?
Yeah, if you can give me a name, because one of the things I was trying to figure out is the most likely text files. I don't know if they're formatted. Obviously, that software package that we used, Screen Scriber, so I forget what the name. We copied it yesterday. Something like that. Won't do PDF. So I wonder if we can get into PDF. That would be the best if we can save some of those. So those disks are not protected. We've got all of them copied, and I've got all of that. We also have all the graphics files of everything that is a picture in the manual. So yeah, if we can connect afterwards, great. Thank you. Any? Okay, well, great. Hope everybody enjoyed it. Appreciate that when I spoke to a few people when I was here a couple of months ago, people thought, I might be interested in some stories. So I thought I'd share that. Some interesting times, fun times, learned a lot. And hopefully anybody wants to play with us, hopefully you'll be able to do that.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.